Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. The first time I heard the word outbreak used like it meant something official, I was standing in line at a gas station in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, staring at a rack of beef jerky I didn't even want. The screen over the counter was playing a local news feed with the sound muted. A red banner crawled along the bottom, and every few seconds the anchor's mouth formed the same tight shapes, short phrases, clipped vowels, the kind of cadence people use when they're trying not to panic. Behind me, a man in a painter's hoodie was talking too loudly on a phone. "Yeah, I'm telling you, it's not just sick people. They're not stopping. They're biting." I turned, half expecting to see him laughing, like he knew how ridiculous it sounded. He wasn't laughing. His face had the waxy sheen of someone who hadn't slept, and his free hand kept tapping his thigh like he was trying to keep his blood moving. The clerk was older, grey hair pulled back in a short ponytail, reading something on his own phone and shaking his head. The gas station door chimed constantly as people shoved in and out, the air smelling like wet coats and unleaded gasoline. I paid for my coffee, and as I walked outside, the wind hit me like a slap. Cold, damp, late fall Pennsylvania. The sky was low, and the clouds were the colour of dirty cotton. Across the parking lot, someone had pulled their car up against the curb by the air pump, hood up, like it mattered that the engine was making a weird noise. I got in my truck and sat for a second, with both hands on the steering wheel. I told myself it was just another morning in a long line of bad mornings. I told myself the news always makes things sound worse than they are. Then, I watched an ambulance scream down the road toward downtown Carlisle. And a minute later, another one. No siren on the second, just the flashing lights and the sense of urgency, like they didn't want to draw attention. I was supposed to be driving to a job site near Mechanicsburg. I worked maintenance for a commercial property company, unclogging roof drains, replacing ballasts, doing the boring stuff that keeps buildings from falling apart. Nothing heroic, nothing that makes a difference. That morning, I turned the other way. I went home because something in my gut said to get to my own door while the roads were still normal. My name is Owen Mercer. I'm 34. Before everything, I lived alone in a small rented house outside of Carlisle. A place with a creaky porch, a one-car garage, and a backyard that backed up to a line of trees and a drainage ditch. I had a dog, a mutt named Ranger, who acted like he'd been born suspicious of everyone and everything. If Ranger didn't like you, I didn't trust you. When I pulled into my driveway, Ranger was already barking from inside, like he'd been watching out the front window for me. I let him out, clipped his leash, and took him around the yard while my phone kept buzzing with messages I didn't want to read. Most of them were the same, just different words. "You seeing this? Stay inside." They shut down the hospital in Harrisburg. My sister called, Lydia. She lived in York with her husband and their little boy. "Owen," she said breathless, "we're packing. Caleb's getting the go bag. I want you to come here." "Where are you going?" I asked. "We don't know yet. Somewhere out of town. Somewhere with land." "Lydia," I said, and I heard the change in my own voice. It was flatter, more careful. "Tell me what you've seen. Not what you've heard. What you've seen." There was a pause. I heard the faint sound of a television in the background, a child's voice asking a question, and then Lydia again, quieter. "On the way to daycare this morning, there was a man on the sidewalk by the bank. He was on his knees like he'd dropped something. I slowed down because I thought he needed help. Then he stood up. His face was wrong, grey, and he moved like his joints didn't work. A woman tried to pull him away from the road. He grabbed her and he wouldn't let go. I sat on my porch step. Ranger pressed against my leg, whining softly like he knew my body language. "Did you call the police?" I asked. "We did. They said they were already coming." Then the line went dead. The call just dropped. "Okay," I said. Okay, listen to me. Get to a place you can lock down for a few hours. Don't go rushing onto the highway with everyone else. The roads will be a mess. Lydia made a small sound. You're not coming? I'm coming, I said, even though I didn't know if I could, even though the idea of driving into the mess felt like walking into fire. Just let me figure out a route. Stay put for now. I hung up and stared at the empty street. A neighbour's garage door across the way was open, and Mr. Donnelly, retired postal worker, always out in his yard, was loading plastic bins into the back of his SUV. His wife stood by the passenger door, holding a laundry basket full of what looked like canned food and medicine. Their eyes flicked towards me and then away. The polite suburban rule of "don't get involved" was still holding for a few more minutes. I went inside and pulled my own bins out of the closet. I wasn't a doomsday guy. I didn't have shelves of freeze-dried food or a bunker under my garage. But I'd grown up around hunters, and I'd worked enough rural properties to know how quickly normal can stop being normal when the power goes out. I had basics, a few cases of bottled water, canned soup, rice, peanut butter, a first aid kit, a camp stove, a box of contractor trash bags, batteries, tools, a hand-crank radio I'd bought during a hurricane scare and never returned. I also owned a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun that I used for clay shooting a couple times a year, and a basic semi-automatic pistol I kept locked in a small safe. Nothing fancy, nothing I bragged about. I set everything in the living room and started making piles. Food, water, medical, tools, clothing, dog supplies. The radio crackled when I turned it on. Stations were jammed with overlapping voices, emergency tones, and long stretches of silence like the people running the microphones had walked away. At 11:30 in the morning, the first emergency alert hit my phone. The tone was harsh and unmistakable. A sound designed to cut through complacency. Emergency alert. Shelter in place. Avoid hospitals and emergency rooms, unless life-threatening. Follow local law enforcement instructions. It didn't say why. It didn't have the words everyone was already whispering. No infected. No reanimated. Just a bureaucratic command and the sense that someone, somewhere, was trying to keep a lid on a boiling pot with a paper towel. I watched out my front window and saw the first sign that the pot was already boiling. A sedan came down the street too fast, hopped the curb, and kept going. It clipped a mailbox, bounced, and then corrected like the driver had yanked the wheel with both hands. The car didn't stop. It shot through the intersection and disappeared. A few minutes later, I heard shouting. Not far, 2 houses down. I grabbed the shotgun, not because I wanted to use it, but because I needed something solid in my hands. When I stepped onto my porch, the street looked the same as always. Lawns, wet leaves, a few cars in driveways. But the sound was wrong. There was a frantic edge to it. I saw Mrs. Hanley, who lived in the corner house, standing on her front step with her phone in her hand, crying. Her husband was in the driveway. He was bent over someone on the ground. At first, I thought it was a fight. Then the person on the ground jerked upward in a way that didn't make sense. And Mr. Hanley stumbled backward like he'd been yanked. Mrs. Hanley screamed. I didn't run toward them. I didn't shout. I froze because my brain was trying to fit what I was seeing into the world I understood. The person on the ground, young, maybe late teens, had blood on his chin. His eyes were open but unfocused. He moved like he was underwater, limbs heavy, head lolling. He lunged again, slower this time, and his hands caught Mr. Hanley's jacket sleeve. Mr. Hanley swung a fist and hit him in the side of the head. The kid barely reacted. Mrs. Hanley ran down the steps. Get off him! Get off him! I took 2 steps forward and shouted, back up, now! Mr. Hanley looked at me, eyes wide with confusion. The kid on the ground turned his head toward my voice like a dog catching a scent. That's the moment I understood. It wasn't anger in that movement. It wasn't drunkenness. It was hunger, stripped of everything else. The kid jerked up again and grabbed at Mr. Hanley's forearm with both hands. Mr. Hanley screamed and stumbled, and the kid's teeth snapped near skin. Mr. Hanley yanked away, and I saw a torn patch of sleeve and a smear of blood. I didn't aim at the kid's head. I didn't think in those terms yet. I just raised the shotgun, kept the barrel low, and fired into the pavement a few feet away. The blast echoed down the street like thunder. Birds exploded out of the trees behind the houses. Ranger barked inside my house, frantic. Everyone froze. Mr. Hanley stumbled back, clutching his arm. Mrs. Hanley stopped mid-step. The kid flinched at the sound, but he didn't run. He just twitched, then started crawling forward again, eyes locked on the nearest moving thing. I shouted, "Get inside, now!" Mrs. Hanley grabbed her husband and pulled him toward the house. Mr. Hanley was breathing fast, face pale, like he was already going into shock. The kid kept coming. I stepped back onto my porch, the wood slick under my boots, and my hands tightened around the shotgun's forend. I remember thinking, in a strange, detached way, that I had practiced shooting paper targets and clay pigeons, not people. The kid wasn't a person anymore, not in any functional sense, but my brain still resisted. He reached the bottom step. His fingers clawed at the porch post. I aimed lower again and fired. This time, the impact knocked him sideways. He hit the wet grass and rolled, then tried to get up. His movements were jerky, uncoordinated, but persistent. He wasn't screaming. He wasn't cursing. He wasn't pleading. He was just trying to get closer. I backed into my house and slammed the door, locking it with shaking hands. I leaned my forehead against the wood, breathing hard. Ranger pressed against my leg, whining, tail tucked. Outside, I heard the kid dragging himself across the porch again, nails scraping. The sound made my stomach twist. I knew then that the street, the neighborhood, the whole idea of calling for help and waiting for sirens, that world was gone. Not eventually. Now. I spent the next hour doing what my hands could do while my mind ran in circles. I pulled every curtain closed. I moved furniture away from windows. I shoved a heavy bookcase against the back door and jammed a chair under the front door handle. I filled bathtubs and sinks with water because I'd learned that trick during storms. When the water stops, you'll be grateful for every gallon you stored. I loaded my truck with the supplies I'd piled. I put Ranger's food and water bowls in the cab. I tossed a sleeping bag behind the seats. I kept the shotgun within reach. I kept checking my phone, but service was getting spotty. Messages came in delayed, sometimes in clusters, sometimes not at all. At 1:20 in the afternoon, Lydia texted, "We're leaving. The neighbours are on the road. Come now." At 1:25, my work supervisor texted, "Do not report. Stay home." At 1:30, I got a call from a number I didn't recognise. I almost didn't answer. Then I did, because the part of my brain still holding on to normal thought it might be Lydia on someone else's phone. A man's voice came through, calm but strained. "Is this Owen Mercer?" "Yes. This is Sergeant Daniel Reeves with the Pennsylvania National Guard. We're doing welfare checks and trying to coordinate safe routes. Your number was on a list for the Carlisle area. Are you alone?" I blinked. "Who gave you my number?" "Property records and employer contacts," he said quickly, like he didn't have time for the question. "Listen, Owen, I need you to take this seriously. We're getting reports of aggressive individuals, bites, and rapid deterioration. We're advising people to shelter in place if they can secure their homes. If you cannot, do you have somewhere you can go that's defensible?" My mouth was dry. "My sister's in York." There was a pause. I heard radio chatter in the background, indistinct. "York's getting heavy traffic," Reeves said. "Routes are congested. If you're going to move, do it now and avoid main highways. But I'll tell you straight, we don't have enough manpower to protect everyone on the road." "What is it?" I asked. "What's happening?" Another pause. Then, "We don't have full confirmation, but the pattern is consistent. People get bitten. They get feverish. They become unresponsive to pain. They attack others. We've been told to treat it like a contagious neurological event." That was the most official euphemism I'd ever heard for what was happening in my street. I swallowed. Okay, what do I do? Reeves exhaled. If you can secure where you are, do it. Keep quiet. Don't draw attention. If you have to move, avoid crowds. And if you know of any hardened structures nearby, storm shelters, reinforced basements, anything like that, those are priority. I hesitated, and then something surfaced from the back of my memory. A job from last spring, a maintenance inspection for a remote facility. There's an old defense bunker, I said slowly, and even as the words left my mouth, they sounded like something from a bad movie. Out west of here, near the Micho State Forest area. I did work near it once. It's meant for soldiers, I think. It's on federal land, or used to be. It's not public. Where exactly? Reeves asked, sharp now. I pictured the drive, winding roads, wooded hills, the way the asphalt narrowed and the tree line closed in. Southwest of Carlisle, off Pine Grove Road, then a service road. There was a gate, no sign, just a chain and a post. Coordinates. I don't know, but I could find it. Do you have supplies? Reeves asked. Yes. Can you get there without passing through town? Probably, I said, though probably felt flimsy. There was radio chatter again. Reeves's voice got quieter, like he was talking through a clenched jaw. If that bunker is real and accessible, it could be a stronghold. But you need to understand something, Owen. Hardened facilities attract people. The moment it becomes known, it becomes a magnet. I know, I said. You go there, you keep it quiet, Reeves said. And if you see military personnel already there, follow their instructions. I understand. He paused. What's your vehicle? 2012 Ford F-150, I said. 4-wheel drive. Good, Reeves said. If you make it there and it's secure and you can safely do it, call this number again. If the network holds, we may try to route civilians to defensible points. A cold feeling slid down my spine. You're going to send people there. If we have to, Reeves said. If we can. But not without coordination. Not without someone there who knows the facility. Listen, we're doing what we can, but you need to take care of yourself first. Then the line went dead. I stared at my phone. Ranger whined and scratched at the door like he sensed movement outside. I stood in the living room with the shotgun in my hands, and the decision hardened inside me like setting concrete. Going to York meant highways, traffic, panic. It meant being stuck in a line of cars while something hungry and relentless wandered between bumpers. Going to a bunker meant isolation, risk, and the possibility of being alone with no help if something went wrong. But it also meant thick walls, a door built to keep things out, and a place where Ranger and I could breathe. I left Lydia a voicemail because texting wasn't reliable anymore. Lydia, I said, keeping my voice steady, I love you. I'm heading to a hardened facility I know about near the mountains. I can't make it to York safely right now. If you can get to a secure place, do it. If roads get blocked, don't force it. I'll try to contact you again when I can. I didn't say bunker. I didn't say military. I didn't say anything that would make someone else listening decide to follow me. Then I loaded Ranger into the truck and drove. Carlisle's outskirts looked like the edge of a storm. Cars were leaving in waves, but not in coordinated lanes. People cutting through parking lots, jumping curbs, ignoring signs. A school bus sat crooked at an intersection, door open, empty. A police cruiser was parked sideways in the road with its lights flashing, but there was no officer in sight. I took back roads, the kind that wind between farms and wooded patches. I kept the truck at a steady speed, not too fast, not too slow. I didn't want to draw attention, but I also didn't want to be caught. Ranger stood with his paws on the center console, nose pressed close to the windshield, tracking every moving thing. His ears were back. Twice, I saw people on the roadside. One woman walking alone with a backpack, looking over her shoulder every few steps. One group of 3 men pushing a motorcycle that had run out of gas. I didn't stop. I hated myself for it, but I didn't stop. Once, I saw one of them. It was in a small town I had to skirt around because the back roads tightened into a bottleneck. A man in a torn jacket stumbled out from behind a dumpster near a closed diner. His head tilted at an odd angle, and his mouth worked like he was chewing. He saw my truck and he moved toward the road. Not a run, not a sprint. A steady, determined shuffle. I didn't slow down. I passed him, and in my rearview mirror I saw him turn, tracking me even after I'd gone by. It wasn't intelligence exactly. It was fixation. As I climbed into the hills west of Carlisle, the roads got emptier. The trees thickened, bare branches interlacing overhead like ribs. The air felt colder here, sharper, like it had less human breath in it. A sign flashed by. Mitchos State Forest. I'd always pronounced it wrong until a co-worker corrected me. Micho, he'd said, like it was obvious. The bunker was somewhere in that expanse of forest and hidden roads. A place you didn't stumble onto unless you knew it existed. I'd learned about it on a job with my company's owner, a guy named Frank who had a habit of taking contracts he shouldn't have because the money was good. We'd been hired to service a generator system at a communications facility. That was all the paperwork said. No business name, no signage, just a set of coordinates and a contact who met us at a gate and watched us the whole time like we were going to steal the bolts off the fence. I remembered the gate. Heavy steel, green paint, a keypad box that looked older than me. I remembered the service road beyond it, cracked asphalt disappearing into trees. I remembered how the facility itself was mostly underground, with only a few vents and a low building visible above grade, like the forest had swallowed it. Frank had joked about it being a bunker for generals. The contact hadn't laughed. Now, as I drove deeper into the hills, I realized how much I'd stored away without thinking about it, like my mind had catalogued details for a day that finally arrived. I found the turnoff by the shape of the ditch and the way the tree line opened slightly. There was no sign, just a narrow gravel entrance, half covered in leaves. The gate was there, chain looped around the bars, padlock hanging. For a moment, relief hit me so hard it made my hands shake. It was still here. I wasn't chasing a memory. Then the second thought came. A chain and padlock meant someone had last secured it. That could be good, or it could be very bad. I got out, keeping Ranger close on a short leash. The forest was quiet in a way that made me hear my own breathing. No birds now. No wind. The padlock was a standard laminated steel lock, the kind you buy at any hardware store. That meant it wasn't some high-security government seal. It meant the gate was secured by habit, not by a federal guard detail. I could break it. I had bolt cutters in the truck, but breaking it would be loud, and loud felt like inviting trouble. I walked the fence line for a minute, scanning for cameras. I didn't see any obvious ones, but that didn't mean they weren't there. Small domes could be tucked under eaves, hidden in the tree line. I made myself breathe slowly and think like a maintenance guy, not like someone in a panic. If this place had been maintained recently, it might still have power. If it had power, it might have alarms. If it had alarms, forcing entry might trigger something I didn't want. I crouched by the keypad box. The cover was weathered, screws rusted. I pressed a finger against the seam and gently pried. The cover popped loose with a quiet snap. Inside, wires, old ones, dusty. No glowing lights, no hum. That told me something important. Either the system was dead or power was off. I went back to the truck, grabbed the bolt cutters, and cut the padlock in one clean squeeze. The metal popped and fell into the leaves. The sound felt huge in the quiet. I swung the gate open, drove through, and pulled it shut behind me. I didn't lock it again. If I needed to leave fast, I didn't want to fumble. The service road was worse than I remembered. Cracks had widened, weeds pushing through. Fallen branches lay across the asphalt. I drove slowly, scanning ahead. A quarter-mile in, the low building appeared between trees. Concrete walls, flat roof. 2 vent stacks rising behind it like periscopes. No windows. A steel door set into the side. It looked like a place designed to be ignored, I parked near the door and sat for a moment, listening. Nothing. Ranger growled softly, deep in his throat, staring at the door like it offended him. "Easy," I whispered, and stroked the back of his neck. I stepped out, shotgun slung, pistol holstered at my waist under my jacket, and walked to the door. The handle was a heavy lever type, painted the same dull green as the gate. There was a keyway below it. I didn't have a key, but I remembered something else. When Frank and I had been here, the contact had used a keypad inside a small exterior box mounted near the door. It had been covered by a hinged metal flap. The flap was still there. I lifted it. Inside was a keypad, the buttons worn smooth. No power lights. I pressed a button anyway. Nothing. So the door was either purely mechanical or it was locked by something inside. I tried the handle. It didn't budge. My heart thudded once, hard. I walked around the building, looking for another entrance. There was one more door on the back side, smaller, with a set of stairs descending into the ground and a concrete overhang above it. That door had a wheel handle like something from a ship, and as I approached, I felt a faint draft, air moving out of the crack around the frame. That made my scalp prickle. Air movement meant a pressure difference. It meant the underground space wasn't sealed and stagnant. It might mean the ventilation system was still operating, even if the outside keypad wasn't. I put my ear near the door. Very faintly, I heard a hum, not loud, not like a full generator, a steady vibration like fans turning somewhere deep. I put my hand on the wheel handle and turned. It resisted, then moved. The door opened inward with a sigh, releasing a colder air that smelled like concrete, dust, and something faintly metallic. Ranger pulled back, nails scraping the stair. "Come on," I whispered. "We're going in." We descended the steps into a corridor lined with painted cinder block. Overhead, fluorescent lights flickered. Some were out, some were dim, but there was light, and light meant power, at least a little. Halfway down, I saw a sign on the wall, white letters on a green background, old and official. Authorized personnel only. Facility number, Raven Rock Auxiliary. No photography, Raven Rock. My stomach tightened. I'd heard that name in passing, usually spoken with a certain tone. One part rumor, one part truth. There was a real military facility near here, deep underground. People called it an emergency command center. Some called it a bunker meant to keep leadership alive during the worst day. This sign didn't say I was in that primary facility. It said auxiliary, which meant it was connected, or related, or built for similar purposes. And I was standing in it. At the bottom of the stairs was another sealed door, thicker, with a wheel handle and a rubber gasket. I turned it too. It opened with a soft suction sound, like a jar being unsealed. Inside was a larger chamber with a security desk, a bank of old monitors, and a wall map under glass. The map showed the surrounding region with service roads and marked structures, the kind of thing you'd see in a military planning room. On the desk was a phone, old school, with a coiled cord. Next to it, a binder labelled Emergency Procedures in block letters. I stood still, taking it in. There were no bodies, no signs of a struggle, no half-eaten meals, no overturned chairs. The air was cold but breathable. The hum was steadier here. Ranger stepped forward cautiously, sniffing the floor, then sneezed like the dust offended him. I moved behind the desk and looked at the monitors. One showed static. One showed a camera feed of the stairwell we'd just come down. Another showed the outer gate area. The image was grainy, but clear enough to see my truck parked by the building. So there were cameras. They were still working. The thought hit me. Someone could be watching. I looked up, scanning the ceiling corners for a camera dome. There it was, a small black eye in the shadow. "Hello?" I said, voice echoing slightly. No response. I swallowed, then tried the desk phone. I lifted the receiver and held it to my ear. A dial tone. That was surreal. In the middle of a collapsing world, in a hidden bunker, there was still a dial tone, like it was 1995. I pressed the buttons on the keypad and listened for the tones. No idea who I was calling. No idea if it would ring. It didn't. I hung up and looked down at the emergency binder. I flipped it open. The first page had a checklist. Power system status, air handling status, water storage level, security door status, communications status. There were handwritten notes in the margins, older, faded. Someone had used this binder recently enough to write in it, but not recently enough for the ink to look fresh. I turned another page and found a facility diagram. Rooms, corridors, storage areas, a generator bay, a water room, sleeping quarters, a small medical bay, and something labelled armory. That word made my mouth go dry. I wasn't here to loot. I wasn't here to play soldier. I was here to stay alive. But a locked bunker with no weapons in it is just a sealed coffin if something gets in. I kept flipping until I found the page, labelled Security Protocols. It mentioned door locks, internal and external. It described a manual override system. It mentioned that the outer door could be secured from inside with a mechanical bar and a locking wheel. Which meant, if I could get inside fully, I could lock it down behind me. I moved deeper into the facility, following signs stenciled on the walls. The corridors were clean but old, concrete floors, painted lines marking pathways, metal doors with labels, electrical, water, medical, operations, barracks. The lights grew steadier as I passed into a main hallway. The hum in the air became more pronounced. I found the power room first, because if I was going to stay here, I needed to know what was keeping the lights on. The door was unlocked. Inside were panels, breakers, battery racks, and a small generator setup. Not the giant diesel units you see at hospitals, but a compact system, likely designed to keep essentials running. The smell of diesel was faint but present. There was a fuel gauge on one tank, just under half. I did quick mental math. If that tank was, say, a few hundred gallons, and the generator ran at a low load, it could last days or weeks, but that was a guess, and guesses don't keep you alive. I found a binder on the wall with maintenance logs. The last entry was dated 6 months ago. A contractor had checked oil, coolant, filters. So it had been maintained, not abandoned. I moved to the water room. Large storage tanks sat behind a chain barrier. There were filters, pumps, and a small ultraviolet treatment unit. Basically a light-based disinfection system used to kill microorganisms in water. It wasn't magic, but it was real and practical. Something you'd use in a facility designed to operate off-grid. One tank had a sight glass showing water level. It looked decent, maybe 3/4 full. My chest loosened slightly. Next, the medical bay. A small room with a metal bed, cabinets, sealed supplies, bandages, antiseptic, gloves, a few IV kits, nothing like a hospital, but enough for basic treatment. Then the sleeping quarters, rows of bunk beds, mattresses wrapped in plastic, lockers. It felt like a place that had been mothballed but kept ready. Ranger seemed calmer now, sniffing and exploring, tail lower but not tucked. I finally found the operations room. It had desks, radio equipment, more monitors, and a wall-mounted clock that still ticked. The time was correct. That clock felt like a taunt. On one desk sat a clipboard with a printed roster, names, ranks, dates. The most recent date was last month. My skin prickled again. If people had been here last month, where were they now? Had they evacuated? Were they in the primary facility? Were they dead? I didn't have answers. I had to work with what I had. An empty bunker, working systems, and an outside world unraveling. I returned to the entry corridor and secured the inner sealed door. There was a mechanical bar that slid into place, locking it. I turned the wheel handle until the gasket compressed tight. Then I went up the stairs to the outer door and did the same. The wheel handle on that door tightened, and I slid the internal bar into its slot. When I tried the handle again, it held firm. For the first time since that morning, I felt like there was something between me and the chaos. I went back down. sat at the security desk, and let my body shake quietly for a few seconds. Ranger sat at my feet, leaning against my shin like an anchor. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay, buddy, we're here." Outside, somewhere above the concrete and steel, the world kept falling apart. Inside, I had a map, power, water, and thick doors. The bunker was meant for soldiers. Now it was meant for me. I spent the first night doing inventory and trying to learn the place like my life depended on it, because it did. I found the storage rooms, shelves stacked with sealed boxes, blankets, spare filters, chemical toilets, MREs, meals, ready to eat, the kind of self-contained food packs issued to military units. I'd eaten them before on a camping trip when a buddy brought a few. They were heavy, salty, and strangely comforting when you were cold. There were cases of bottled water too, even with the tanks available. Redundancy, because in planning, you assume something will fail. I found a small kitchen area with a microwave, a sink, and cabinets. The microwave didn't work, probably too much load for the limited power system, but the sink ran cold water. The hot water was either off or non-existent. I found a communications closet with radios and antennas routed to the outside. There was a landline system too, likely connected to some buried network. I didn't understand it fully, but I knew enough to not start flipping switches blindly. At around 9:15 p.m, I tried my cell phone again. One bar of service flickered, then died. I tried the desk phone in operations again, dial tone. I tried dialing Lydia's number out of sheer hope. No ring. I tried dialing a simple number I knew by heart, my own voicemail access. Nothing. I hung up and stared at the phone like it had betrayed me. That night, I slept in a bunk with Ranger curled at my feet. The room smelled like plastic and old fabric. The lights were dimmed, but I left one on in the hallway. I didn't want to wake up in total darkness. In the middle of the night, I heard a sound through the concrete that made my eyes snap open. A distant thud. Then another. Not a knock on the door. Something heavier. Something above, maybe on the surface near the entry building. Ranger lifted his head and growled low. I got up, moved quietly, and went to the security desk. The monitors showed the stairwell, the exterior door, and the outer gate. At first I didn't see anything. Then the camera view shifted slightly, and I realized it wasn't shifting. Something was moving in front of it, close enough to distort the image. A face pressed against the lens, grey skin, dead eyes, mouth open. It lingered there for a second, as if trying to understand the barrier between it and what it wanted. Then it slid out of view. I watched, breath held, as another shape wandered into frame. Then another. They moved aimlessly until something, sound, scent, vibration, pulled them toward the door. They began to bump it, not with intelligence, but with persistence. The door held. I sat there until morning, shotgun across my lap, watching grainy images of hungry shapes that never got tired. By sunrise, the camera view showed them drifting away, as if my silence had starved their fixation. I didn't go outside. Not that day. On the second day, the bunker taught me its first lesson. A facility meant for soldiers assumes a chain of command. Without one, it's just a machine that you have to learn before it fails. I found the air handling room, fans, filters, ductwork. The hum I'd heard was from there. The system was running on a low setting, circulating air, keeping humidity down, preventing mold. There were filter cartridges stacked nearby, and a pressure gauge that would tell me when the filters started clogging. That was good, but it was also a timer. Filters would eventually need changing. Fans would eventually wear. The generator would eventually run out of fuel. I needed a plan beyond hide until it blows over, because nothing about this felt like it was going to blow over. I spent hours studying the facility diagram and the wall map. There were service tunnels marked secondary exits, and something labelled vent shaft access. The map suggested the bunker had more than one way to the surface, likely for emergency egress. If the main entry became blocked, I needed another way out. I followed a corridor labelled maintenance and found a hatch in the floor with a ladder descending further. It led to a tunnel lined with cables and pipes. The air was colder here. The tunnel ran for a long distance, and I didn't explore far that day because I didn't want to get lost in a place that could become my tomb if I made a wrong turn. I marked the hatch location with a strip of bright tape I found in the supply room, the kind used for hazard marking. Simple, visual, hard to miss. That afternoon, I heard voices for the first time since arriving. They came through the bunker's radio, faint and distorted, like they were bouncing off mountains. I turned knobs, adjusted squelch, the control that cuts out background static on a radio so you only hear real signals, and finally caught a clear phrase. Repeat, this is Harrisburg Emergency Net. If you can hear this, respond with your location and status. My hands shook as I leaned in. This wasn't entertainment radio. This was amateur radio, ham radio. People using personal radio equipment to communicate when phone networks failed. You don't need the internet for it. You need a radio, an antenna, and someone listening. The bunker's equipment was better than most personal rigs, but I didn't know its setup. Still, I could hear them. That meant someone else might hear me. I pressed the transmit button on the microphone, hesitated, and then spoke. "This is Owen Mercer," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I'm in a hardened facility west of Carlisle, near the Michaud State Forest area. I'm secure for now. 1 adult male, 1 dog. Over." There was a long pause. Static hissed like wind. Then a voice came back, surprised and cautious. "Owen Mercer, this is Harrisburg Emergency Net. Operator name is Marla. Confirm, you are in a hardened facility. Do you mean a storm shelter or military?" I stared at the microphone. Saying military bunker on an open frequency felt like painting a target on my own door. But if I lied and someone depended on that information later, I could be hurting them. "I mean reinforced underground facility," I said carefully. "Concrete, sealed doors, generator power, water tanks. Over." Another pause. "Copy that," Marla said. "Are you able to assist others if directed? We're trying to map safe points. Over." My throat tightened. The warning Reeves gave me echoed in my head. Hardened facilities attract people. The moment it becomes known, it becomes a magnet. I had enough supplies for 1 person and a dog, maybe for a few people if rationed. But if a crowd arrived, the doors could become a battleground. "I can't take a large group," I said. "Small number only, and only if we can coordinate quietly. Over." Marla's voice softened slightly, like she understood the fear behind my words. "Copy. Stand by. We may route you a direct contact. Keep transmissions short. Over." I let go of the transmit button and sat back, heart hammering. It was official now, in a way that mattered. I wasn't just hiding. I was part of a map people were drawing in real time, trying to keep pockets of humanity alive. And maps attract travellers. On day 3, the first traveller arrived. I saw it on the outer gate camera first, a pickup truck creeping up the service road, stopping near the gate. 2 people inside. One got out cautiously and looked around, shoulders hunched against the cold. He wore a camouflage jacket and carried a rifle at low ready, not pointed, but present. He moved like someone who had done this before. The second person stayed in the truck. The man at the gate rattled it, then stepped back and called out. "Hello," he shouted. "Anybody in there?" I watched from the monitor, pulse loud in my ears. If I didn't respond, he might leave, or he might try to force entry, or he might camp and wait. If I responded, I might be inviting danger. I thought of Lydia. I thought of Reeves. I thought of the phrase, "Take care of yourself first," and how it sounded noble until you were staring at another human being outside your fence. I keyed the bunker's exterior speaker system. There was a button on the security desk labelled PA system and a mic that likely fed to an outdoor horn speaker near the entry building. My voice came out tinny but clear. "Stay where you are," I said. Hands visible. Who are you? The man jumped slightly, then looked around until he spotted the speaker box mounted on a post. My name's Tom Klein, he shouted back. This is my wife, Jenna. We're from Mount Holly Springs. We saw the gate and figured it might be safe. We're not here to cause trouble. I watched his body language. He wasn't trying to hide. He wasn't pacing. He wasn't pushing toward the gate again. What's in the truck? I asked. Food, water, fuel cans, a med kit, he said. We've got 2 sleeping bags. We've got nowhere else. I swallowed. Any bites? Any sickness? Tom's face tightened. No, he said quickly. No, we've been careful. I stared at the camera feed, then at the heavy inner door on the monitor. If I let them in, I risked everything. If I didn't, I might be sending them to die. I thought of a middle ground. Back the truck away from the gate, I said. Park it in the clearing, then step out, both of you. Leave weapons in the truck. Stand with hands up. Tom hesitated, then nodded. He walked back to the truck, spoke to Jenna through the window, and they reversed slowly, parking in a small open patch where the camera had a clear view. They stepped out. Jenna was smaller, wearing a thick coat and a knit hat. She looked exhausted, eyes hollow with fear. Tom set his rifle in the truck bed and stepped away, raising his hands. I exhaled slowly. I went through the bunker's internal procedure the way I'd seen it described in the binder. Unlock the outer door, open it, clear the stairwell, close it, then unlock inner door. Always keep one barrier between you and the outside. It took time, and my hands shook, but the mechanics were simple. Steel, wheel handles, bars, nothing fancy. When I finally opened the outer door and stepped out into the cold forest air, I felt exposed like a snail without a shell. Tom and Jenna were at the gate, hands still visible. Don't move, I said, voice firm. The shotgun was in my hands, pointed down but ready. Tom nodded. We won't. I walked to the gate, keeping distance. Up close, I saw Tom's face more clearly. Early 40s, stubble, a cut on his cheek that looked old. Jenna's lips were cracked from cold and stress. You understand, I said. If you lie to me, we all die. Tom's eyes met mine. I understand. I unlocked the gate by simply moving the chain aside. It was no longer locked, just looped. I opened it and gestured. One at a time, I said. No sudden moves. You go first, Jenna. Jenna stepped through slowly, hands up. Tom followed. I closed the gate behind them. We walked toward the entry building in silence. The only sounds are boots on wet leaves and Ranger barking faintly from somewhere inside, hearing unfamiliar voices. At the door, I stopped and turned to them. This is the rule, I said. You come in, you follow my instructions. If you don't like it, you leave now. Tom nodded quickly. Okay. Second rule, I said. If anyone gets bitten, they tell me immediately. No hiding it. Jenna's eyes filled with tears. She wiped them with a sleeve. Okay. I opened the door and we descended into the bunker. When the inner door sealed behind us, the air changed. Warmer, drier, like the bunker exhaled. Jenna looked around with awe and fear. Tom let out a long breath. Jesus, he whispered. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt heavier, because now I wasn't just responsible for me and Ranger. I was responsible for a small piece of society. And society, even in a bunker, comes with problems. Over the next week, the bunker filled slowly, never more than a trickle, but enough to change everything. Tom and Jenna proved useful immediately. Tom was a mechanic. Jenna had been a nurse's aide at a long-term care facility. They weren't soldiers, but they knew how to fix things and how to keep people alive. 2 days after they arrived, an older man showed up alone on foot. His name was Gus Redding, retired Army, Vietnam era, hard eyes and a limp. He carried a battered backpack and a revolver he kept holstered but didn't flaunt. I'm not here to take over, Gus said the first time he looked at me. I'm here because I'm old and I'd prefer not to die in a ditch. He said it like a joke, but his eyes were serious. I made him go through my rules. He complied without complaint. Then came Maya Torres, 28, a civil engineer who had been working on bridge inspections around Harrisburg. She showed up with a hard hat clipped to her pack and a rolled-up set of paper maps. She'd walked most of the way, avoiding roads. "I heard a transmission," she said, breathless, "about a hardened facility. I'm not sick. I'm not bitten. I just need a place where I can sleep without something trying to get through a window." She was smart, practical, and she looked at the bunker like a system to be maintained, not a magical refuge. That made me trust her more. We stayed at 6 people total, plus Ranger. That was my limit. That was what our supplies could support without turning into a desperate crowd. Every time someone else showed up at the gate, I made a choice that carved a piece off my soul. Sometimes the choice was no, and I watched them leave, shoulders sagging, disappearing back down the service road. Sometimes the choice was, take this food and go, and I handed them a small bag through the gate, like charity in a war zone. And once, the choice was, we can't, and the person didn't leave. He tried to force his way in. It happened on a grey afternoon, when the forest was silent, and the cameras showed a man alone with a crowbar, prying at the gate like he'd done it before. I spoke through the speaker. "Stop, back away." He ignored me. I repeated, louder, "Back away from the gate." He looked up at the camera and shouted, "I know you're in there. I heard you on the radio. Open up." Gus was beside me at the monitor, jaw tight. "That's why you don't talk on open channels," he muttered. "I didn't give a location," I said, but even as I said it, I knew how meaningless that was. People can triangulate with landmarks, with knowledge, with desperation. The man at the gate slammed the crowbar again. Tom hovered behind me. Jenna had Ranger leashed, keeping him back. Maya's voice was calm but tense. "If he breaks the gate and we open the door, we lose control of choke point." I nodded, mind racing. "We don't open." The man managed to wedge the crowbar under a hinge plate and pry. The gate shuddered. Gus leaned closer to the microphone. "Hey!" he shouted through the speaker. "You keep that up. You'll get hurt." The man laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "You old bastard. Open up." Then he did something worse. He stepped back and looked down the service road, and he shouted, loud enough that it echoed through the trees. "Help! Over here! They've got a bunker! Food! Water!" My stomach dropped. He shouted again. Again. He was trying to summon others like a flare. Gus's face went hard. "We can't let him do that." "I'm not shooting him," I said, voice low. Gus looked at me. "You think I want to? But if you let him bring a crowd, you'll be shooting anyway, because a crowd will tear that gate down, and then you're done." I stared at the monitor. The man was still yelling, hoarse but determined. Maya said quietly, "Non-lethal options?" I scanned the facility diagram in my mind. Ventilation shafts, exterior speaker, cameras. Then I remembered something in the supply room. Tear gas masks? Probably not, but there were fire extinguishers. There were smoke canisters? Maybe. I ran, boots thudding in the corridor, and yanked open the emergency supply cabinet near the entry. Inside were 2 canisters labelled smoke, training, green. Military training smoke grenades, used for signalling and exercises. Not weapon grade, but designed to produce thick smoke. "Got something!" I shouted, grabbing one. I didn't like the idea of using anything that could escalate, but I liked the idea of a mob less. I returned to the entry stairwell. Through the outer door's peephole, I could see the man at the gate. I cracked the outer door just enough to slip the canister out. I pulled the pin and tossed it toward the gate area, aiming wide so it wouldn't hit him. It landed and began to spew thick green smoke. The man shouted and stumbled back, coughing. He waved his arms, crowbar forgotten. The smoke rolled around him, obscuring the gate and the road behind. He coughed harder, eyes watering, and backed away, swearing. "What the?" He retreated down the service road, still coughing, disappearing into the trees. The smoke hung for a long time in the damp air, a bright, unnatural cloud that felt like a beacon even as it solved the immediate problem. When I sealed the door again, my hands were shaking. That'll keep him away, Tom said, trying to sound reassuring. It might bring others, Maya said softly. Gus nodded. That's the problem with any signal. That night, we had our first real meeting in the operations room. 6 people around a table meant for military planning, lit by dim fluorescent lights, with a dog lying under the table like a silent witness. I laid it out without drama. We're not invisible anymore, I said. We need a plan for when more people come. We need a plan for when supplies run low. We need a plan for what happens if the generator fails. Jenna looked pale. I thought this was safe. It is safer than a house, I said. But nothing is perfect, so we make it better. Maya leaned forward. We need to assess fuel consumption. If the generator is running, we need to know load. What systems are essential? Lights can be minimized, ventilation can be balanced, water pumps can be cycled. Tom nodded. I can check the generator and see if there's a manual on it. There's always a manual. Gus tapped the table. Security. We need layered security. We also need rules on radio. No more broadcasting the nature of this place. I nodded. Agreed. We assigned roles, not because we were playing army, but because structure keeps people from unraveling. Maya took lead on systems, power, water, ventilation. Tom took mechanical tasks, generator maintenance, door hardware, any repairs. Jenna took medical inventory and hygiene protocols, because sickness in a bunker can kill you without any zombies involved. Gus took security with me, monitoring cameras and planning what to do if the gate was tested again. I took responsibility for overall coordination because it was my mouth on the speaker and my choice to let them in. We created a simple radio policy. We would listen, gather information, and only transmit when necessary, using vague language about secure shelter without details. We also created a strict entry protocol. No one inside opens doors alone. 2-person rule, like safety policy in hazardous environments. 1 person handles the door, another covers and watches. Anyone entering must wash, change clothes if possible, and be checked for injuries. No exceptions. It felt harsh, it felt cold, but harsh and cold are survivable. The days became a rhythm of maintenance, listening, and small forays to the surface. We couldn't stay underground forever without resupply. Even with tanks and stored food, fuel was the true clock. Without fuel, the bunker would become dark, damp, and eventually unlivable. The air would stagnate. The water system might fail. The doors would still be thick, but thick doors in a dead bunker are just a slow trap. So we took calculated risks. The first surface run was simple. Check the entry building, clear debris, inspect vent stacks for blockages. We went out at dawn, when the infected, if that's what they were, seemed less active. I don't know if that was real or just luck, but dawn felt quieter. Gus and I moved like hunters, slow and scanning. Tom stayed close, focused on practical tasks. Maya watched the tree line constantly, eyes sharp. Jenna stayed inside with Ranger, monitoring cameras. We found evidence of infected movement near the gate. Muddy footprints, drag marks, a smear of dried blood on a fence post. Nothing fresh. We found something else too. Tire tracks. Recent. Someone had come by during the night, turned around, left. The bunker was in people's minds now. We worked fast, kept quiet, and returned inside. Over the radio, we learned fragments of the wider picture. Harrisburg had declared some form of emergency. The highways were clogged and dangerous. Hospitals were overwhelmed and in some cases closed. The National Guard was active but stretched thin. There were rumors of federal evacuation points, but nothing consistent. And always the same warning repeated by different voices in different towns. Avoid bites, avoid contact, stay away from crowds. The infected didn't act like movie monsters. They weren't sprinting, at least not most of them. They weren't strategizing. But they had one advantage that mattered. They didn't stop. They didn't get tired. They didn't care about cold or pain or fear. A human can run out of adrenaline. They didn't. By the end of the second week, the outside world had changed enough that even the radio voices sounded different. Fewer casual check-ins, more clipped survival talk. Marla, the operator voice I'd first heard, came on one evening with a message that made the room go silent. "This is Harrisburg Emergency Net," she said, voice tight. "We are receiving multiple reports of organized looting in the region. Use caution. Some individuals are using false distress calls to lure people. Confirm identities when possible. Do not reveal supply locations on open channels." I looked at Gus, and he gave me a grim nod like he'd been expecting it. People weren't just running from the infected now. They were running from each other. That's when the bunker's second lesson arrived. A defense bunker meant for soldiers assumes the enemy is outside. But when society breaks, the enemy can wear a human face and speak politely into your speaker. It was day 17 when a voice came through our exterior speaker system before any vehicle appeared on camera. "Facility personnel," the voice said, calm and authoritative. "This is Lieutenant Harris with the Pennsylvania National Guard. We are conducting a sweep of hardened sites. Open your outer gate for inspection." Gus's eyes narrowed. "Lieutenant who?" Maya's face went still. "Do we have a roster? Anything with names?" I shook my head slowly. The bunker's clipboard roster was old and unrelated. Tom whispered, "Could be real." Jenna's hands tightened around Ranger's leash. I pressed the microphone button. "Lieutenant Harris," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "Identify your unit and provide a call sign. We will not open without confirmation." There was a pause. Then, "We don't have time for games. Open the gate." Gus leaned in close to me, voice low. "That's not how military talks when they're trying to keep civilians calm. That's how someone talks when they're used to people obeying them, or when they want to sound like it." I swallowed. "We can verify through radio." I keyed the internal radio mic and called on the emergency net frequency. "This is secure shelter west of Carlisle," I said. "Request verification. Does Pennsylvania National Guard have a Lieutenant Harris conducting inspections of hardened facilities in this region? Over." Static. A pause. Then Marla's voice came back strained. "Secure shelter west of Carlisle. Negative confirmation. We have no record of that name on our coordination list. National Guard units are not conducting civilian inspections at this time. Repeat, do not open to unverified personnel. Over." My heart hammered. I looked at Gus. He gave a small nod, satisfied, but grim. I switched back to the speaker system. "Lieutenant Harris," I said, "we cannot verify your identity. We will not open the gate." The response was immediate, and the calm voice dropped its pretense. "You're making a mistake," the voice snapped. "We know you're in there. We know you have supplies. Open up, or we'll come in." Then a truck appeared on the gate camera. Actually, 2 trucks. One pulled up fast, stopping hard near the gate. The other stayed back. Men got out. 4 of them, all armed. Not uniforms, mixed gear, hunting jackets, tactical vests, one wearing a hoodie under a plate carrier. They moved with purpose. My mouth went dry. "Positions," Gus said, voice hard. "We planned for this. We talked through scenarios. But planning is different than watching 4 armed men approach your gate like they own it." Tom moved to the inner door controls. Maya grabbed a pair of binoculars from a cabinet and leaned toward a monitor. Jenna moved Ranger back into the barracks corridor and closed the door, keeping him quiet. I stayed at the security desk with Gus, watching. One man approached the gate with bolt cutters. Another held his rifle at a low angle, scanning the trees like he expected an ambush. They weren't infected. They were worse in a different way. They could think. "Smoke canister?" Maya asked quietly. "If we use it, we reveal we have them," Gus said. "They already know we're here," I said, voice tight. The bolt cutter man tried to cut the chain. There was no chain now, just the gate itself. He grabbed the bars and shook them, testing. Then he pulled a pry bar from the truck bed and started working on the latch. The gate was sturdy, but it wasn't designed to withstand a determined assault for long. Gus looked at me. You decide, he said. I made myself breathe. My mind flashed through consequences like a slideshow. If we did nothing, they might break the gate and get closer, potentially to the entry door. Even if they couldn't breach the bunker door, they could camp, threaten, draw infected with noise, or wait us out. If we use smoke, we might drive them back temporarily, but we might also escalate them into using gunfire, which would echo through the forest like a dinner bell. If we fired warning shots, we'd be choosing a line we couldn't unchoose. I looked at the monitor, at the men, at the crowbar, at the way they moved like they'd done this before. They're not here to inspect, I said quietly. They're here to take. Gus's jaw tightened. Then we make taking too expensive. I pressed the speaker button, voice cold now. Step away from the gate, I said. This is private secure shelter. We have confirmed you are not National Guard. Leave now. One of the men looked up at the camera and grinned, like he enjoyed being watched. Then he raised his rifle and fired a shot into the air. The crack echoed through the trees. Ranger barked underground, muffled but frantic. My body reacted before my mind did. I flinched, heart slamming. The men laughed. Gus's voice was a growl. Now it's a fight. Maya's eyes were wide. They'll bring infected with that noise. Tom's hands were clenched. We can't let them hang around. I grabbed the training smoke canister and a second one. We do it fast, I said. We throw smoke, we lock down, we go dark. Let them choke and wonder, and let the infected hear them, not us. Gus nodded. Good. We moved to the outer door together, Gus covering, me handling. I cracked the door just enough to throw the first canister, then the second, aiming to blanket the gate area and the trucks. Green smoke blossomed in thick clouds, spreading quickly in the damp air. Outside, I heard shouting, coughing, surprised curses. Then more gunfire, not aimed at us, but fired in frustration. We sealed the door and spun the wheel tight. The bunker's thick walls swallowed most of the sound, but not all. The vibrations came through the metal. We went back to the monitors. The camera feed was partially obscured by smoke, but I could see silhouettes moving. The men retreated toward their trucks, coughing and waving arms. One stumbled, and another grabbed him, dragging him back. They got into the vehicles and reversed, backing down the service road. But they didn't leave entirely. One truck stopped farther back, just at the edge of the camera's range, like they were regrouping. Then, through the smoke, another shape wandered into frame. Not human in movement, grey, jerky, head tilted. An infected had been drawn by the noise. It moved toward the gate, not toward the trucks, because the gate area held the strongest concentration of sound and scent. More shapes followed. 3, then 5. The men by the trucks noticed. One shouted, another fired at the approaching shapes. The infected didn't drop easily, not from body shots. They kept coming, relentless. In the grainy camera feed, it became a scramble. Men backing up, trying to keep distance, infected closing in. The smoke made it chaotic, a fog of panic. I watched, stomach clenched, as one infected grabbed at a man's sleeve. He jerked away, but another infected latched onto his arm. He screamed. The other men fired wildly, yelling. Then they ran to the truck, dragging the screaming man with them. They shoved him into the back seat. The truck peeled out, fishtailing on wet leaves. The second truck followed, both disappearing down the service road. The infected lingered near the gate, milling, bumping against it with dull persistence. Then, slowly, they drifted away again, drawn by other noises in the forest or simply wandering. In the operations room, no one spoke for a long moment. Jenna finally whispered, Are we bad people for that? Gus answered before I could. We didn't do that. They did that. They came here with guns to take what wasn't theirs. The world's different now. I stared at the monitor, at the empty road, at the smoke thinning into cold air. We just learned something, Maya said quietly. What? I asked, voice hoarse. This bunker, she said, doesn't just keep out the infected. It keeps out desperate people. But it can also become a trap if people decide to siege us. Tom nodded. They could come back with more. Gus's eyes were hard. Then we prepare. That night, we changed our strategy. We went darker. We shut down unnecessary lights. We reduced generator load. Maya adjusted ventilation to a lower but safe setting. Enough air exchange to keep us breathing and keep humidity manageable, but less noise and less power draw. We created a ration plan. Not starvation, but controlled use. We logged every meal, every gallon of water, every battery. We also set up an internal alarm system, simple, mechanical, a string of empty cans on the stairwell, tied to a line, so if anyone breached the outer door, the cans would clatter, low-tech, reliable. And we built a rule that felt cruel but necessary. We would not open the gate for anyone unless we could verify identity through radio contacts or clear evidence we trusted. No more impulse mercy. Mercy had to be survivable. Weeks passed. The bunker became a strange kind of home. We cleaned, we organized, we exercised to keep our bodies from turning into mush underground. Gus made us do basic drills, nothing dramatic, just moving quietly, communicating in whispers, covering doors. Maya taught me how to read the generator gauges properly. Oil pressure, coolant temperature, output load. She explained that running a generator at too low a load for long periods can cause issues in some systems, but ours seemed designed for variable load with battery buffering. Still, we treated it gently. Tom changed oil, cleaned filters, and kept the mechanical parts from betraying us. Jenna ran a strict hygiene routine, hand washing, disinfecting shared surfaces, isolating anyone with a cough. She wasn't paranoid, she was practical. In a sealed environment, a simple stomach bug can spread like wildfire. And Ranger adapted. He learned the bunker's corridors. He learned which doors meant outside, and he learned to be quiet when I put my finger to my lips. Sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in the operations room and stare at the wall map, tracing roads toward York, toward Lydia. I'd listen to the radio for any mention of her town. Once, I heard a voice from York on the net, cracked with grief, saying the city had become too dangerous and they were heading east. I never heard Lydia's voice. It ate at me like a slow burn, but I couldn't leave, not with the bunker functioning, not with 5 other lives tied to it. Then, in the 6th week, something changed. It wasn't the infected. They were still out there, still wandering, still dangerous. It was people. The radio chatter shifted from panic to planning. Small communities were forming. People were talking about perimeters, gardens, water sources, watch rotations, not governments, not armies, just survivors, building structure out of necessity. And then, one evening, Sergeant Reeves's voice came through the radio, scratchy but unmistakable. "This is Sergeant Daniel Reeves," he said, "Pennsylvania National Guard. If you can hear this, we are coordinating with civilian strongholds. Repeat, coordinating. We are not evacuating. We are stabilizing pockets. If you have a secure facility and can assist in establishing a corridor for medical supplies, respond." My hands went cold on the microphone. Gus looked at me. Maya's eyes were sharp, calculating. Tom whispered, "That's the guy who called you." Jenna swallowed. "Is it real?" I listened. Reeves's voice didn't sound like a man pretending. It sounded tired, rough, but controlled. It sounded like someone who'd spent weeks doing impossible work. I pressed transmit. "Sergeant Reeves," I said. "This is Owen Mercer. Secure underground facility west of Carlisle, Michaud area. We spoke early in the outbreak. I have 5 civilians and 1 dog here. Facility is stable. Over." There was a pause. Then Reeves's voice returned, relief in it like a crack in armor. "Owen," he said. "Copy. I remember. Are you able to receive a small team for coordination? We need to establish a medical supply route between Harrisburg-adjacent pockets and western strongholds. We've had bandit activity. We need hardened relay points. Over." I looked around the room. Everyone was watching me. This was the moment the bunker was built for. Not just hiding, but serving as a node in a larger defense network. But the bunker was also our lifeboat. Opening it to military coordination meant making it more visible, more traffic, more risk. Gus's expression said what his mouth didn't. Be careful. Maya's eyes said, opportunity, supplies, intelligence. Jenna's face said, if it brings medicine, it's worth something. Tom's jaw was tight, but he nodded slightly. I keyed the mic again. Reeves, I said, we can coordinate with a small verified team, 2 to 3 personnel. No large groups. We require verification and controlled entry. Over. Reeves didn't hesitate. Copy. 2 personnel. 1 medic, 1 security. We will approach at first light tomorrow. We will use the call sign Keystone 2. I will transmit a verification code on approach. Over. I exhaled slowly. Copy. We will monitor cameras. Out. When I released the button, the bunker felt quieter than it had in weeks. Gus leaned back in his chair. Well, he said dryly, now we find out if the world's got any honest uniforms left. The next morning, at 7:10 a.m., the gate camera showed a single vehicle approaching, an olive-drab military truck, not a flashy armoured vehicle, just a practical transport. It stopped at the gate. 2 people stepped out. One wore a uniform with visible patches. The other wore a medical kit slung across their chest. Both kept their rifles slung and pointed down. A voice came through the radio, exactly as promised. Secure facility. This is Keystone 2, Reeves's voice said. Verification code is Raven 6. Repeat, Raven 6. Maya looked at me, eyebrows raised. The facility sign had said Raven Rock Auxiliary. Raven. Reeves had chosen the right word. That didn't guarantee safety, but it was a strong sign. I pressed the radio transmit button. Keystone 2, I said. Copy Raven 6. Hold position. We will open outer gate only. Weapons remain slung. Hands visible. Over. Copy, Reeves said. Gus and I executed the entry protocol. Outer gate first. No inner door until we confirmed. When the gate opened, the 2 personnel walked through slowly, complying. The medic was a woman in her 30s with her hair pulled back tight, eyes alert. The security was a younger man with a disciplined stance. Reeves wasn't with them. That made sense. He was coordinating, not personally touring. Inside the entry building, the medic introduced herself. Specialist Erin Patel, she said. Combat medic by training, but right now, I'm just a medic. The security man said, Corporal Jake Sutter. They looked around, impressed despite themselves. This place is real, Patel murmured. It's real, I said, and we want to keep it that way. Patel nodded. We're not here to take over. We're here to establish a relay. We brought them inside, through the 2-door sequence and into the operations room. Jenna watched Patel like a hawk, half protective, half relieved to see someone with real medical gear. Patel opened her kit and showed sealed supplies, antibiotics, bandages, antiseptic, pain relievers, practical life-saving items. She also handed Jenna a small box with something that made Jenna's eyes widen. Rapid infection screening swabs, Patel said. Not perfect, but better than guessing. Reeves asked me to bring them. I stared. You have tests for this? Patel's expression tightened. We have limited diagnostics. The cause is still unknown, but we've learned patterns. We've learned how to identify high-risk exposures early. We've learned that hiding bites kills everyone. Gus grunted. No argument here. They laid out the plan. There were small civilian strongholds east of the mountains and a few west. Supplies needed to move quietly along back roads. The bunker could serve as a way station. 1 vehicle at a time, drop supplies, pick up others, never staying long. In exchange, we'd receive periodic resupply, fuel, medical items, tools, not endless, but enough to extend our survival and keep the bunker functioning. There was a catch, of course. The bunker can't be just a hiding hole, Sutter said bluntly. If it's part of a corridor, it needs perimeter awareness. That means someone has to occasionally observe the route, check for ambush signs, Check for infected clusters near the service road. I felt a cold knot form. We're not a patrol unit. Patel held up a hand. We're not asking you to fight battles. We're asking you to be eyes and to keep this place from becoming a blind spot. You already have cameras. That's more than most. Maya leaned forward. If we do this, we need fuel data. How much can you supply per drop? Sutter produced a notebook. We can start with 20 gallons of diesel every 7 days, assuming corridor stability. If the corridor breaks, supplies become irregular. Tom exhaled. 20 gallons helps. It wasn't a lot, but it was a lifeline. I looked at my group, my accidental crew, and realized the bunker had changed our role, whether we wanted it or not. We could stay sealed forever and eventually fail, or we could connect carefully and increase our odds. I made the call. We do it, I said, but we keep tight control. We don't become a refugee camp. We don't broadcast. We don't open to unverified groups. Sutter nodded. Good. That's how strongholds survive. Patel looked at Jenna. We can also train you on wound care and screening. If you're taking in supplies, you'll eventually see injured people. Jenna swallowed, but her eyes were steady. Teach me. That day, after Patel and Sutter left, after we sealed the doors and watched their truck disappear down the service road, the bunker felt different again. Not safer, not less dangerous, just connected, like a vein had opened between our underground pocket and a larger body that was still trying to live. That night, I sat alone in the security room and watched the cameras, listening to the faint hum of fans and the steady tick of the wall clock. I thought about how the bunker had been built for a war no one wanted, a contingency for a nightmare scenario. It was meant to keep soldiers and leadership alive long enough to rebuild. Now, it was doing exactly that, in a way no engineer could have predicted. A mechanic, a nurse's aide, a civil engineer, an old soldier, and a guy who used to unclog roof drains were sitting under a mountain, keeping a light on. The outbreak hadn't ended. The infected were still out there. People were still dangerous. But we weren't just waiting anymore. We were adapting. And adaptation, I realized, was the only thing that separated a bunker from a tomb. On the wall map, Raven Rock Auxiliary was just a label in a forest. In our lives, it had become a line between losing everything and keeping something worth carrying forward. I scratched Ranger behind the ears. He leaned into my hand and sighed. Okay, I whispered, the same words I'd said the first night. Okay, buddy, we're still here. Above us, the world was broken. But down here, in concrete and steel, we were building rules, routines, and the fragile beginnings of a future, one careful door seal at a time. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.